Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE into the royal Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt, a family of Macedonian Greek origin that had ruled since the era of Alexander the Great. From an early age, she was trained in statecraft, languages, and the traditions of both Greek and Egyptian governance. She could speak several languages fluently, including Egyptian, a rarity among her predecessors, and this ability helped her connect with her subjects more deeply than any ruler before her. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss more chilling tales from history's darkest corners. When her father, Ptolemy XIV the Orleans, died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra ascended to the throne alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, as co-ruler. However, their joint reign quickly descended into rivalry. The young king's advisors, seeing Cleopatra's growing influence, conspired to push her out of power. Exiled from Alexandria, Cleopatra regrouped in Syria, where she began assembling an army of mercenaries to reclaim her rightful throne. It was during this exile that Cleopatra's political instincts sharpened. She understood that Egypt's survival depended on Rome's favor, for the Republic's growing power reached across the Mediterranean. When Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt during Rome's civil war, Cleopatra saw an opportunity to regain control. She famously arranged to meet him in secret, smuggled into his presence within a rolled carpet. The meeting marked the beginning of an alliance that would alter Egypt's fate for decades. With Caesar's backing, Cleopatra defeated her brother's forces at the Battle of the Nile in 47 BCE. Ptolemy XIII was killed in the fighting, and Cleopatra was reinstated as queen, ruling alongside another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. Soon after, she bore a son, Caesarion, whom she claimed was Caesar's child. Her reign now stood secure under the shadow of Rome's protection. Cleopatra's government was highly organized, blending Egyptian traditions with Greek administration. She reinstated agricultural reforms to stabilize grain production along the Nile, restored temple endowments to strengthen her legitimacy among priests, and increased trade with neighboring regions, ensuring Egypt remained prosperous. Her image was carefully cultivated as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, which deepened her divine authority among her people. In portraits and temple carvings, she appeared as both pharaoh and goddess, wearing traditional Egyptian regalia while preserving her Hellenistic style. This dual identity was key to maintaining control over a diverse kingdom, as it united her Greek ruling elite and native Egyptian subjects under one symbolic figure. She became known not only as a ruler, but as a representation of life, fertility, and divine order. Despite her success, Cleopatra's court was marked by political intrigue and constant vigilance. She ruled during a period of Roman expansionism, where every alliance carried immense risk. The death of Julius Caesar in 44 BCE created turmoil for her. To safeguard Egypt's independence, Cleopatra turned her attention to another Roman power broker, Mark Antony, a general in Caesar's faction. Their first meeting in Tarsus was not merely diplomatic. Cleopatra sailed up the Cydnus River in a barge decorated with gold, silver, and purple sails, evoking the image of a goddess descending from myth. The spectacle impressed Antony, who invited her to return to Alexandria. There, the two formed both a political and personal alliance that reshaped the Mediterranean balance of power. Antony's presence in Egypt strengthened Cleopatra's rule. Together, they held lavish ceremonies, distributed lands, and secured Egypt's borders against foreign threats. Cleopatra was declared Queen of Kings, while Antony granted her territories that restored Egypt's influence over parts of Syria, Cyprus, and Crete. Their union symbolized the fusion of Eastern monarchy and Roman ambition. Cleopatra's rule during this period was one of prosperity and reform. She restructured taxation systems to favor farmers, expanded irrigation projects along the Nile Delta, and promoted science and education through the Library of Alexandria. She also strengthened Egypt's naval power to ensure control over trade routes. Her palace in Alexandria became a center of culture, philosophy, and learning. Scholars, mathematicians, and astronomers from across the Hellenistic world gathered there under her patronage. Cleopatra herself was known to debate scholars and attend experiments, reflecting her intellectual curiosity and command of knowledge. However, her growing power and Antony's alliance with her were seen in Rome as a threat to the Republic's stability. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, viewed their union as a political betrayal and began a propaganda campaign to turn Roman opinion against them. Cleopatra was depicted as a seductress corrupting a Roman general, while Antony was portrayed as abandoning his Roman identity for an Eastern queen. Despite the tension, Cleopatra remained focused on her kingdom. She continued to secure Egypt's economy, improve trade routes along the Red Sea, and maintain the religious festivals that reinforced her divine status. Her popularity among Egyptians remained strong, for she was seen as a defender of their traditions in a world increasingly dominated by foreign powers. The queen's administrative skill extended to matters of security and justice. Her methods of enforcing order were strict, often invoking fear among traitors and conspirators. The royal courts operated under her watchful gaze, and punishment for treason was severe. Cleopatra believed that a stable reign required visible justice, and for that she employed methods that ensured obedience throughout her lands. As years passed, her relationship with Antony deepened into both personal affection and shared ambition. They had 3 children together, strengthening her claim to a dynastic rule that could challenge Rome's dominance. Yet, beneath the splendor of Alexandria's marble halls, Cleopatra's attention remained fixed on loyalty within her court. She was aware that betrayal could come from nobles, servants, or even her generals. By 34 BCE, her empire reached its zenith. Cleopatra stood as the last great monarch of ancient Egypt, commanding both wealth and fear. Her court blended opulence with discipline, and her justice, swift and unforgiving, was known across the Nile Valley. Within her private chambers, however, she began designing new means to punish those who dared to defy her rule. These punishments, rooted in ancient Egyptian belief and adapted by her personal philosophy, symbolized divine retribution. Among them was a method that would later be remembered across centuries: the use of venomous serpents in judgment and execution. But this was a tale yet to unfold, one that would reveal how the Queen of Egypt turned nature's deadliest creatures into instruments of royal justice. As Cleopatra's power reached its height, she had become both the protector and the punisher of her realm. The world would come to remember her not just as a ruler of wisdom and beauty, but as the queen whose reign bound life and death together through the hiss of the serpent. By the time Cleopatra entered the final decade of her reign, her reputation for justice had become inseparable from her methods of punishment. Her court in Alexandria was both a seat of refinement and a place of fear, where loyalty was rewarded with gold and betrayal was punished with precision. Within the grand palace overlooking the Mediterranean, the queen established a private chamber of judgment, known to her guards as the Hall of Silence. It was here that the condemned met their end through a method unique to Cleopatra's rule: the Serpent Pit. The origins of this punishment were not born of cruelty, but of symbolism. In Egyptian mythology, serpents were creatures of both death and renewal. They represented the cycle of life, the transition from mortality to the afterlife, and the divine retribution of the gods. Cleopatra, deeply versed in these traditions, believed that certain crimes, especially treason and blasphemy, required punishment delivered by forces beyond human control. The venom of the serpent became to her the will of the gods made visible. The pit itself was located beneath the eastern wing of the royal compound. It was a circular chamber, built of smooth limestone walls, designed to prevent escape or purchase. At its base were baskets filled with cobras, asps, and vipers, collected from the deserts and marshes along the Nile. The chamber was dimly lit by oil lamps placed high above, casting flickering shadows that seemed to move like serpents themselves. Few who entered the pit were ever retrieved alive. According to ancient accounts, Cleopatra oversaw the design of the pit personally. She ordered her architects to create a structure that balanced ritual with efficiency. A wooden platform suspended above the pit allowed guards to release the condemned with minimal risk. Before execution, priests performed purification rites, invoking Isis and Wadjet, the cobra goddess of protection, whose image adorned Cleopatra's crown. To the queen, this was not an act of barbarism, but a sacred ritual, a demonstration that divine justice still ruled in mortal courts. The condemned were often political traitors, advisors who sold secrets, generals who defied orders, or envoys who conspired with Rome. Each execution was carried out in secrecy, witnessed only by a small circle of officials and high priests. The queen rarely attended personally, yet her presence was felt in every ritual gesture. It was said that her commands were spoken softly but carried the weight of judgment. The serpents used in the pit were bred and handled by royal keepers trained in venom extraction and serpent behavior. They knew the distinctions between species: the swift striking asp, the spitting cobra, the silent horned viper. Cleopatra was particularly fascinated by the asp, whose venom caused paralysis and calm before death. She regarded it as a symbol of controlled transition, an ideal embodiment of divine justice. Egyptian physicians under her service conducted studies on the venom's effects. These observations were recorded in scrolls that blended medical curiosity with theological interpretation. They noted how the victim's heartbeat slowed, the muscles stiffened, and the breath faded without prolonged agony. Cleopatra's scholars describe the process as the silent judgment, in which the serpent's bite carried the condemned peacefully into the afterlife. Although intended for punishment, the Serpent Pit became a tool of political control. Rumors of its existence spread among the nobility, discouraging dissent. Envoys from foreign powers approached Cleopatra's court with caution, aware that betrayal could lead to a death sanctioned by both queen and gods. This fear preserved order in a kingdom that balanced precariously between internal intrigue and Roman intervention. Inscriptions from temple archives describe the pit as part of the queen's greater philosophy of governance. Justice to her was not merely the enforcement of law, but the preservation of balance, the ancient concept of ma'at. By ensuring that those who disrupted harmony met their fate through divine symbols, she reaffirmed her legitimacy as the chosen ruler of the gods. Her punishments were often accompanied by ritual offerings. After an execution, priests would burn incense and place lotus petals on the pit's surface. These offerings symbolized purification of the soul and restoration of universal balance. The remains of the victims were later entombed in unmarked graves, their names erased from public record to prevent unrest. Despite the secrecy surrounding the pit, foreign observers left descriptions of its effects. Roman diplomats stationed in Alexandria wrote of whispered stories within the palace, of muffled cries beneath the marble floors, and the faint sound of serpents moving in darkness. Whether these reports were embellished or factual remains uncertain, but the reputation of Cleopatra's justice spread across the Mediterranean. In her private chambers, Cleopatra studied the venomous creatures with personal interest. Her attendants recorded that she often kept small asps in glass containers, observing their movements and feeding habits. Some historians suggest she viewed them not as instruments of death but as emblems of wisdom and divine order. To her, their venom was nature's truth, impartial and incorruptible. As her alliance with Mark Antony deepened, Cleopatra's rule grew more secure, and the Serpent Pit was rarely used against internal enemies. Instead, it became a deterrent, a reminder that the queen's mercy had limits. The existence of the pit alone was enough to maintain loyalty among the ranks of her officials. However, as tensions between Antony and Octavian escalated, Cleopatra's reliance on fear-based order intensified. Roman propaganda painted her as a tyrant who ruled through poison and charm. Yet within Egypt, she remained a figure of reverence, seen as the earthly vessel of Isis who defended the kingdom's sovereignty through divine means. Toward the end of the decade, as Roman legions gathered in the west, Cleopatra ordered the expansion of her inner sanctum. The Serpent Pit was reinforced and concealed beneath new stonework. Its serpents were preserved by royal handlers, maintained not merely as tools of punishment, but as symbols of the queen's enduring control. To her subjects, the pit represented the boundary between life and judgment, a warning that treachery against Egypt would be answered by the hiss of divine vengeance. Yet Cleopatra herself saw in it a deeper meaning, that life and death were intertwined, and that power, once granted by the gods, could only be taken away by them. The Serpent Pit remained hidden from foreign eyes, its existence known only to the queen and her closest circle. But history would later recall its design, its purpose, and its role in shaping the legend of the last pharaoh. For within those walls of stone and venom, Cleopatra's vision of justice took its most haunting form. The harmony of punishment and divinity joined in silence beneath the palace of Alexandria. In 30 BCE, the fate of Egypt turned with the outcome of the Battle of Actium. Mark Antony's forces were defeated by Octavian's fleet, and the once powerful alliance that Cleopatra had built crumbled under the weight of Roman ambition. As Antony's troops deserted and the Roman legions advanced toward Alexandria, Cleopatra withdrew into her palace, aware that her reign was nearing its end. Antony returned to Egypt broken and wounded, and their final days together were marked by silence and resignation. When Octavian's armies entered the city, Antony took his own life, dying in Cleopatra's arms within the marble halls that once celebrated their triumphs. The queen, now alone, understood that capture would mean humiliation. Rome intended to display her in chains, a living trophy of conquest. Cleopatra resolved that her death would remain her own choice. She ordered her attendants, Iris and Charmian, to prepare the Hall of Silence one last time. The Serpent Pit, long hidden beneath layers of secrecy, was opened. The queen's most trusted serpent keepers were summoned, carrying baskets that contained the asps she had once used for judgment. These were the same creatures that had delivered divine justice to her enemies. Now, they would deliver it to her. Before the act, Cleopatra adorned herself in royal attire, a white linen robe, a golden diadem, and the sacred ornaments of Isis. She wished to die not as a captive, but as a pharaoh. She instructed her attendants to record the ritual as an act of sovereignty, not surrender. To her, death by venom was not defeat but transition, a return to divinity through the same sacred force that had preserved her rule. In her final moments, she held one of the asps in her hands. Witnesses later described that she remained calm, as if in communion with the creature. The bite came swiftly, and her body stiffened, but her face retained serenity. To those who found her, she appeared as though asleep, her features untouched by pain. The queen, who had ruled through wisdom, power, and fear, had chosen to meet death with composure. When Octavian entered her chambers, he found her lifeless beside her attendants, both of whom had also taken their own lives. The basket of serpents lay nearby, confirming the method of death. For the Romans, it was a final act of defiance. Cleopatra had denied them the spectacle they sought. She had embraced the same symbol that had defined her justice, the serpent, silent and divine. Her body was buried beside Antony as she had wished. The Serpent Pit of Alexandria was sealed forever, its purpose fulfilled. With her death, the Ptolemaic dynasty ended, and Egypt fell under Roman rule. Yet the legend endured, the image of a queen who made venom her crown, and death her final act of sovereignty. Cleopatra's reign, from rise to fall, remained bound to the hiss of the serpent, her ultimate symbol of power, wisdom, and unbroken will.